everyone on this call. Yeah, that would be right. David, Gail, Crystal, Carol. Yeah, it's the usual regulars.
Right.
Okay. We'll go ahead and start then, Hannah.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So just as an update, I think Hannah had sent out the questions from the last COVID guide that we did. I think most have already submitted their responses, but if there are any still have yet to do so, then please drop your updates. Then we were thinking of doing a podcast or a HR bulletin for this year, and we wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. Some of the ideas that we thought would be good would be remote working in a borderless world, and the reason why we brought that up was because of late getting several inquiries, particularly from non-Malaysian citizens, who have basically requested for viability of working whilst they're in Malaysia for entities either wholly based in the States, Australia, wherever they may be. And I don't know if that is something that would be common across all jurisdictions, or if any of you have some other ideas that we think for the bulletin or a podcast. So feel free to chip in.
Sukanti, sorry, although I hear you badly.
Sorry, is this any better?
Yeah.
Looks
It
like
was
you're still
sounding a bit.
struggling.
I could hear you, but it was a little bit choppy.
Okay, all right. Let me try and hold on. Is that any better now?
Yeah.
Okay. It was the fan. I think that caused the interruption. So just as a quick recap, we were thinking whether remote working in a borderless world, whether that would be something viable. And what I said was that the reason that prompted that topic was because of the inquiries that we've been receiving of late, particularly from expats. You know, they're coming into Malaysia, so the spouse wants to carry on working, not for entities in Malaysia, but from whether they are based in US, Australia, and so forth. And I thought that would be something interesting, but I do not know if this is something that would generate that interest from a global perspective. So if you feel that that's something we can do, then that's one topic. But otherwise, we're looking at what ideas any of you may have. This bulletin or podcast.
Again, did you want us to react on this topic? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think that's a yes, Gael. I'm not sure if you're having audio issues still.
Okay, so it seems that I have some difficulties with my audio. Welcome, everybody. So yes, indeed, it's a hot topic in Belgium too. So we have a lot of requests from, let's say, employer that are facing employee who, in fact, have left the country without requesting their employer if it was okay to leave Belgium. And so they have moved into, let's say, different locations, some of them exotic, some of them not so exotic. But it's a hot topic, and so we are facing this difficult situation with employee not Belgium anymore, and leaving the employer with all the tax and social security issue. Because if these guys are living for, let's say, more than a few weeks, it was a question of the tax and the social security applicable. And on top of that, after a few, let's say, weeks or months, it could also raise the question of the applicable law. So it's something that we are facing for the moment. And most of the employers that are now drafting a telework policy consider that it's forbidden to work from abroad. So you can work where you want in Belgium, but not in a foreign country, except if you request it and only for a very limited period of time. And it will, this period of time will depend on the country where you go.
Anna, do we have a tax group within the World Law Group? In the US, and it sounds like maybe in Belgium too, it's largely a tax issue. And so I don't know, maybe if this would be a joint podcast or seminar.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, we do have a tax group.
I think it's a great topic. It's coming up a lot here as well.
Yes, Jonathan.
I think it'd be a great topic, and it's one that's becoming increasingly relevant. And I'd make two observations. The first is that the pandemic has accelerated massively remote working, and people now don't understand, or employees don't understand, why they can't work from anywhere. So one of our own lawyers wanted to work from Medellin in Colombia, which was an interesting issue for us. It was resolved through other means, but just this week we have a query from a client where an employee is saying, I've actually been working remotely in Greece, despite my title as UK country coordinator, since 2019. And working out in which country she has employment rights, because this is a question of somebody returning from maternity leave, is really very difficult. Now, we could not possibly, between us as a group, come up with every scenario in every country. But what I think we can talk about is the essential questions of, firstly, is home working allowed at all? Secondly, if it's home working across border, in which country do we think regulates this employment relationship? And also the question that has been mentioned by you, David, as to who is paying tax where on this. And in a podcast, we can ask the difficult questions, and we can give a couple of examples from our respective jurisdictions. But the key thing is to get employers and employees thinking about these issues, because at the moment they're not. And the reason I say that, and this is my second point, is I gave some material to the Financial Times on employment law in the so-called metaverse. This idea that there's going to be a virtual reality space where you have your own avatar and everyone's going to live and work in the metaverse. This is Mark Zuckerberg's latest big idea. And the employment issues which come out of that are the same ones we face already anyway. They're the ones that I've just described. But what really interested me was the comments below the line in the article, where there were lots and lots of people who are saying, there's no problem here. You know, it's all perfectly obvious. We have cross-border working relationships at the time, and people do not realize just how difficult they are. So I think it would be a really good topic for a podcast.
There's also some potential corporate ramifications. I don't do corporate law, so I don't know the details, but there's always the concern that when you die and by virtue of the number of days that you're working, there may be this issue of a permanent establishment. So I don't know, again, if that is relevant. Like I said, I don't do corporate law, but that could be a potential area as well. Sorry, Gabriela, you had your hand up.
No problem. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that as of January this year, here in Brazil, we have a digital nomad work visa authorization. So because of it became very popular, like remote work, and we had a lot of foreigners wanted to come to Brazil to perform cross-border remote work, then on January, we had this new regulation issued. A foreigner working for a foreign company can come to Brazil and stay in Brazil for up to 2 years, linked to the regulation of his own country, as long as he fulfills some obligations and shows that he has means to support himself, like at least he has to receive $1.5 thousand per month, or has to show some evidence that he has like a fund equivalent to $18,000. But there are some situations that now it's possible to have this cross-border remote work, obtaining this visa. This person cannot work for a local company, cannot interact with Brazilian market, so needs to continue to be linked to the company abroad, needs to continue to be performing services to the company abroad. But the tax issue will exist because this is just like a regulation for immigration and labor, but the person will become a tax resident in Brazil. So this is something we have to analyze together. And also, if this person performs work for Brazilian company, then it's necessary to obtain a different work visa, and also the permanent establishment risk will come up. We had a lot of questions during the past 2 years related to this matter, cross-border remote work. The regulation is pretty new, as I said, it's just from January this year. And I think a lot of people would be interested in a webinar related to this topic. So please count with me, and I'm up to be part of it.
Probably the first, I think, that's actually come out with this digital nomad authorization. That's the first I've heard. Well done.
I have done a research, and I think currently there are 23 countries that have a digital nomad visa. But I can later share with you guys the places that they already have this digital nomad. They are not very huge countries, but I will send it to all of you if you want.
Nice. That'll be interesting. I know we're not on the list, that's for sure. Does anyone else have any views? Was this oh, yes, hi, Veena.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you all today. Yeah, I think just one additional parameter that would be relevant from India is the fact that we also are an exchange controlled jurisdiction, which means that the government really monitors money going out and money coming in, and therefore people going out and people coming in terms of business. So which has become very relevant in the last 2 years, because a lot of people do find India, especially we have some lovely beaches and some nice holy hilly spots where people have decided to just come down and stay and work from wherever. So that's creating not just tax and permanent establishment and corporate issues, but it's now triggering exchange control issues as well. So that's an interesting perspective. And also the urban and rural cost of living expense has started seeping into the cost of company and remuneration parameters. There are lots of employees who are perfectly comfortable moving back to what we call tier 2, 3 cities, where the cost of living is much cheaper, and therefore they're happy to take a pay cut and work from, like the other colleague just mentioned, work from anywhere. It's not really necessary, or it's people don't really find the necessity to come to a metropolitan city, sit out of a large a corporate park and work out of there. They were remotely working, sitting at a beach somewhere.
Veena. So maybe it looks like more or less this. Oh, sorry, Francisco. Francisco.
Yes, Shubhanti, how are you?
Yes. Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just saw your hand. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to share with you that actually this situation came across to us very recently, actually from a UK British law firm who had an attorney working from Mexico. Very, very similar situation because she was on maternity leave and she was married to a Mexican citizen who was working in Mexico. So the situation came that the maternity leave period has elapsed, and she wanted to continue working from Mexico. The issue is that, of course, the British law firm doesn't have any legal presence or physical presence within the country, and she is actually performing for British companies alone. So from a pure legal perspective, it seems like she was working in the UK because she was being paid there under the payroll in the UK, performing services remotely for British clients as well. But the fact of the matter is that she's been working in Mexico for the past 2 years. So there is a risk from a tax perspective that she may, because she's performing activities within Mexican soil, that she will need to pay income taxes, which she had not paid. And of course, that is a very interesting situation. The fact of the matter is that it will be very, very difficult for the Mexican tax authorities to realize that there is an individual working from Guadalajara and performing services for a British law firm. That will be very difficult for the authorities to become aware.
Then I think from an employment or immigration perspective, generally, if you're doing it completely remotely, then there's no presence of that entity within the country that you're performing the services for, then it seems to be clear in that you can go ahead, but the implication comes more from a tax perspective, isn't it? I mean, from what Gabriela said, the other first I've heard that where you actually have such an authorization, but otherwise generally it seems to be the case. Employment immigration, you're doing it entirely remotely, no presence here, seems to be clean. It's tax issues that could potentially.
Not really, at least not from an employment perspective, because at least in theory, whenever there is an employment relationship with effects within Mexican territory, Mexican law applies. So the fact, but of course, it is one thing is the theory, and the other one is the practical issue, right? It is not very easy for an individual to bring any sort of action against a legal entity which has no assets, no legal presence, no physical presence within Mexican territory. That will mean that you file a lawsuit here. For instance, let's say that this attorney is fired eventually in Mexico, and she wants to claim for Mexican severance because that is higher than British severance. That will mean that she needs to bring a lawsuit in front of a Mexican court, and this law firm needs to be served in the UK through diplomatic channels. It will take at least, in best case scenario, 12 months. Best case scenario, because there is language barriers and you need to request the assistance of Mexican authorities so that they coordinate with British authorities. It's not easy at all. And I'm saying best case scenario, it could be much worse. So in practical, that is always a specific obstacle that is not easy to sort out. And what this means is, in practice, parties tend to come to an arrangement, an agreement, and try to formalize the separation eventually.
Thanks for that, Gail. Sorry, you wanted to say something just now?
I don't know if some of you had a question of your clients regarding the increase or decrease of remuneration depending on the location. So we had a few questions. Let's say it's more explanatory question from clients. And in fact, they are quite, let's say, okay to have people working abroad in teleworking mode, even if, let's say, in let's say some exotic country where the cost of living is quite reduced in comparison to Belgium. But they are considering in such circumstances to reduce, in fact, the global remuneration package, saying, okay, if you work in Europe, then you have to face the cost of life. If you want to work from, I don't know, Bali or Sri Lanka, we are open to that. Of course, we'll support you for the tax and social security contribution because like that we comply with the regulation, but you cannot expect to have the same remuneration. And so we'll have to reduce or agree on a new remuneration if you want to work from these kind of countries.
Yeah. So shall we take this then as a topic, whether it's going to be a podcast, webinar, bulletin? I'll let Hannah tell us which way to go about on that. But are we agreed then to have this as a topic? Then the next issue would be how do we want to go about it? Whether, you know, do we do it by jurisdictions or we have a mix for the Americas, Southeast Asia, or what do you reckon?
I think we could do this a number of ways, Suganti. I like the idea of doing a podcast. We haven't done that with this group or with any groups yet, and it's definitely something we've started to talk about. I think people are really liking that content that they can just listen into for 20 minutes as opposed to sitting in front of their computer, you know, watching the slides go by on a webinar. So I do like the idea of doing a podcast and maybe by jurisdiction. The one thing I would just say is that I think we'll want to have a bunch of them that we can sort of record over the course of a week or two before we sort of officially launch them, so that we have that content and we're not launching a podcast, have an episode, and then it's a month or two before we have another one. And I think if we did it sort of as a regional approach, it might be a little more manageable to do it that way, to do sort of, you know, the Americas and doing subsets of different regions. But I definitely leave it all up to you as to what you guys think as well. But I like the idea of doing a podcast.
Okay, so like the idea, do we have the ability to do that? Because that was where I think we were stuck the last occasion.
Yeah. So I talked to Tori, and what we were thinking, because we can turn any of this into an audio clip. So when we do meetings and we have recordings where somebody has presented for 15 minutes and we take a chunk out, you know, if somebody's presented on a particular tax law and we upload it to the website, we just convert the file to an audio recording. So we can do that very easily. So we could come on here, like we're all sitting in the room, video, chatting with each other to record this podcast. And then Tori will edit it out. You know, we can get into the whole creating some sort of jingle or introduction, that sort of thing, which I think we'll want to do. But once we do that, we can take any of these Zoom videos and transfer them to a file that is an audio recording.
Okay, great. That sounds good. So
would it make sense? Sorry, Shuganti, would it make sense to have, let's say, specific question, exactly the same question, country by country, like that there is a kind of continuity?
That was what I was going to suggest, that perhaps we could then put down what our proposed questions were, and we can then pick a few so that those questions can be replicated for the different jurisdictions. So for those of us who have some ideas, then maybe we could, you know, we can send it to Hannah and copy the rest of us so that we'd have like a table, I think, and we can then pick the common questions for the jurisdictions. That be a workable idea?
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, so that deals with our podcast. Next, I think on the list was on quarterly meetings. Still do them every quarter, right? Any changes for that? Okay, so that's fine. The other thing I thought that we could do was perhaps to bring in the younger associates. No offense intended to any of us here, but perhaps to start encouraging the younger associates within each of our firms to start coming for these meetings. And perhaps once we connect them, then they'd be able to take it off separately, because sometimes I find that it's good to start them young and you cultivate that interest. So maybe we could do that first with the young lawyers networking. If you think that the associates within each of your firms would be receptive to that, then one suggestion I had was that maybe we can put in, 2 or 3 from HR specifically, so that there's that common interest there. And once they get together, then let them take it on after that. I think that would be a good suggestion.
Yes, I think I have already talked to some of my associates that they would love to have this opportunity.
Okay, because I think they won't want to speak to us, so it's better for them to connect with their own generation. So,
I
okay,
think
so
it's a
maybe-
great idea, Suganti.
If I can
Um,
add,
Go ahead.
sorry, Shuganti, if I can add one word on this, and I'm sure Gael is well aware of this. We within CMS, and especially in the employment group, we have what we call the associate initiative, and by which they have their own agenda. And for example, currently they are running various webinars on network. It's more connected to soft skills for them, which is very useful. But so they are really eager to be involved, not only in purely technical work, but as well in networking and within practices, and then within different offices. And I know, I guess Gail knows it, but it's quite successful, and they have. They had one webinar this week, which was across Europe, which was well attended. So it's a very good initiative.
Excellent.
It works well, and indeed, in fact, it was not linked to, let's say, technical issue, but let's say more on soft skills. And so the idea is to have to give them some responsibility, so they have to take the lead. The public they address is younger associates, so it's not a business or let's say a partner things. And yes, it was quite well attended. So we had the first one, I think it was last week. We have the second one this week. It was, let's say, I think the subject was pricing. So it's something that we can all share. And it's a way to involve them and to have them a little bit more involved into the group and into the structure.
So,
and it was based on a voluntary basis. So it was in fact centrally decided that everyone could apply, whatever the country, and depending on the submission and the ID that they can provide for the group, they will be selected, and then they will constitute a group, and they will have to, let's say, try to, let's say, organize and put things together within the support of, let's say, partners or other persons. So it's something we could propose, saying, okay, we want to constitute a group of younger lawyers. They have to apply to the board. The board will select them, for example, 4 or 5 of them. They will be, let's say, the head of the younger group, and they will take care of a few projects.
That's a good initiative, actually, for the involvement. So, Hannah, maybe we could set a date, and then we will reach out to our associates once we have a date in our calendar for that. So maybe we join in at the beginning bit or something, or, you know, we just, because they need some form of like intro or something, right? Before the networking can take place.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I let you know because typically how we've done these speed networkings in the past is, you know, we've invited everybody in a particular area or subset of something, you know, whether it's women or a particular practice area, and they all join on. We sort of welcome them from World Law Group, and then we just send them off. I like the idea of maybe spending the first 10 or so minutes making some introductions with and, you know, maybe we cap the size of the group, and if we have to do a couple of different sessions, I'm more than happy to do that. Or if we want to do them maybe regionally based, I'm also happy to structure it that way. I'm happy to work with you guys. And then after the introductions, I can drop them into the room, and the more senior lawyers, I will call you all, can drop off.
I think that will be good. Okay, so that sounds like a plan then. Then we also, I think, Gail, you mentioned about the whistleblowing and non-compete said that's currently a topic, I think. You mentioned that that's garnered quite keen interest. Do you want to take that off?
Yeah, so especially in Europe, so we have to transpose a European directive regarding whistleblowing, and so a few European countries have already transposed this directive. Few others not yet, as in Belgium. So it will be done in a few weeks or in a few months. But I think it could be useful to have a kind of short, let's say, Q&A like we did for COVID regarding the whistleblowing directive. So let's say 3 to 5 questions, very straightforward and short answer, something that we can update on a regular basis, but quite, let's say, manageable, not long answers, let's say a few lines by question. And like that, we can have something that we can put in online and follow on a regular basis. But I don't know if outside Europe it's a hot topic or not. And so for Europe, it's a hot topic, but for the rest of the world, I have no idea.
Right, and we've talked about this, I think, Gail, in the compliance group and then the privacy group, and that's what we heard in Europe. It was big in other parts of the world, not so much. There wasn't anything, you know, sort of formal in place. So I think this is also an opportunity to work with a couple of those other groups on, you know, publishing a guide or Q&A.
From my point of view, a guide, it's a lot of work. In fact, it takes time, and it's not very easy to manage. I really love the format that we had for COVID because it was super manageable, does not take too much time, and at the end, I think it was a big success. So we had a lot of feedback from clients. So from my point of view, that's the best format we can put online.
I prefer that as well, Gail. It's much easier for me to manage an update on a rolling basis for somebody to just send me an email and say I have an update and I copy paste it. So I too prefer that.
But it might be good maybe
like
to discuss this.
Sorry, is this then like the COVID guide that we've been doing?
Right. It would be similar to format in that. What I'd like to do is connect the three of you with the privacy leaders and the compliance leaders, because they've all talked about it. And I have mentioned, I said, we have a number of groups that are interested in this topic. We've done, we did a webinar in the fall, I think out of Germany, on the topic. So I think that it sort of touches a lot of different areas. So I would like to sort of loop us all in and see if maybe we all have the same sort of idea, or if one group wants to do a webinar, that sort of thing. It's definitely a hot topic in Europe, and I think very far reaching, so we could do a lot with it.
Okay, so if that's where we're at, then perhaps for the questions on the remote working in a borderless world, if everyone could maybe come back, say over the next fortnight, then we can look at something in the, do you reckon the first quarter, or is that too ambitious, Hannah?
I think probably second quarter would be feasible. That would give us enough time to, if we get the questions together, we finalize them, we could record a couple of these. I think second quarter is probably feasible.
All right. So in a fortnight, then I guess everyone comes back. Would it be all right if we channeled it to you, copied to the rest of the HR group, so that we can just see where everyone is at? And then maybe we could circulate like a table or something. You know, these would be the preferred choice questions, and then move on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Excellent. I think aside there doesn't seem anything else, I think, on our part. Gail, David, anything else?
Not from my perspective.
Does anyone else have anything that we didn't include on here? This group is inclusive, so just because we put out an agenda doesn't mean we can't touch on something that you guys want to talk about going on in your own jurisdictions or have a discussion about. We do have almost 20 minutes left, but that doesn't mean we need to use them.
Doesn't look to be the case. So then we'll just reconnect by mail then. Yeah, okay, all right, great. Thanks,
Great,
everyone.
and I'm going to, Sugandhi, I'm going to start with this group that attended today to start the questions and see, just because it's smaller, we had the conversation, everybody sort of knows what we're talking about. So I'll start with an email to all of you that will just be the group that attended today. And then we can reach out to the group at large after we've come up with a list of questions and have them weigh in.